148b, Kuf Mem Ches Amid Base, about 15 lines from the top. This is talking about borrowing on Shabbos, where the language you use in borrowing, if it sounds too much like a loan, which may be written down because you want to make sure you remember or you want to write a contract. So that's something that you can't, the language you shouldn't use in Shabbos, because obviously you're not allowed to write on Shabbos. But if you change the language and you say it in a manner that you'd like to have something that the other has, can I have some bread? I'm out of challah. Can I have some challah? Can I have some salt? That is the language to be used when you're borrowing something on Shabbos. So b'Shabbos uda aser al b'chol shaper domi. Borrowing a loaf on Shabbos, and that's okay. But you can't say borrow. But on a weekday, that would be okay. Wait, we have a problem. What would be the halacha about ribis, about interest? The value of the bread today may be $1, and then if flour inflates in value, and then when I give it back to you, the value would be $1.20, and that's an interest, even though they're both a 1 pound bread, but the laws of ribis, Hillel says, it translates not in the size and volume of the item borrowed, but the monetary value at that point. So Laban Masisa like Hillel. Let's say our Mishnah is not like Hillel. As we learned, the Mishnah says that said Hillel. Don't lend something to a loaf of bread to your friend until you make it into its value, and you say, okay, so what? This is $1, and now if the price increases, so what? What you borrowed was $1. You know what you owe is $1. Because maybe the price of wheat will go up and it'll be considered a ribis, so you always have to make it into a value. And in our Mishnah, it seems you just can't borrow it on Shabbos, but on a weekday you can do it. The Gemara says, it depends. If it's a known value, there's not going to be a ribis question, because if the price goes up, it's a set value for bread or for flour, and if the price goes up, so you'll pay back the value, not the loaf of bread. So you borrowed a bread, and everybody knows a loaf of bread is $1, and so if the price goes up, so you'll just give back the $1, and that's why it's going to be permissible. That's why it's okay. But indeed, if the price is not set and it fluctuates, then you should Hillel is then our Mishnah would perhaps say, like Hillel, that you have to set the value of the borrowed item before you borrow it, so that you don't get to a problem of paying interest, meaning paying back an item that's worth more than you originally borrowed. And the Mishnah said, well, what happens if you need to quote unquote borrow, but you can't say the term, so you're going to say, can I have a loaf of bread? I'm out of bread. Or can I have some salt? And the lender, or maybe a shopkeeper, so it's a seller, wants to make sure they're going to get paid. And in the Mishnah, we had a similar case if somebody forgot to designate a Korban Pesach. And in order to designate the Korban Pesach, and Erev Chag is Shabbos. So this person comes in and says, hey, can I have a lamb for my Pesach? And he's not in the business of gifting lambs. This person is selling them. But it's Shabbos, he can't sell them, and he doesn't want to, obviously we want to make sure he's not writing. So he's going to take collateral. He says, sure, leave your scarf and come pick up the scarf after Chag, and we'll work it out. So itma avas yontiv If somebody makes a loan on Yantiv, Rav Yosef Amalei Nitnei Tava. That's a type of loan that you cannot claim in Beis Din. You cannot take the other to court and say, he borrowed X amount of money, or he took a lamb that was worth $100. V'Rabba Amar Nitnei Tava. And Rabba says it is claimable in Beis Din. So Rav Yosef Amalei Nitnei Tava, Rav Yosef says that it's not claimable in Beis Din. The Amris Nitnei Tava. Because if you say that you could claim it, Asila Michtav, you may come to write it down because he's going to write the details in order to take it to court. Rabba Amar Nitnei Tava. Rabba says no, it is claimable in Beis Din. The Amris Nitnei Tava, because if you don't allow him to come to Beis Din, he's not going to lend it to him. He's not going to go through this non-transaction. And what's going to end up happening is that the person who needs meat on Yantiv, bread on Yantiv, salted is whatever it may be, he won't be able to do it. Nobody's going to want to lend, and therefore it has to be claimable in court, and on account of what the person leaves there as collateral, and we're not concerned that he's going to write. So again, we are on 148b, Kuf Mem Ches Amud Beis, the second wide line. Tanan, if he doesn't trust him, he leaves his garment with him as collateral. Now the Gemara says, if Rav Yosef is right that you cannot claim it in Beis Din, that's why he's going to leave the talis, his item with him, in order to be able to make the claim after Yondav. And he's going to, after Shabbos, he's going to come in and they'll work out what he owes it. However, if it could be collected and based in either way, so why is he leaving collateral just after Yondav? He'll take him to court. Just let him pay it. And he'll claim it in court. Amar says no. I don't want to have to start looking for a lawyer and pay judges. I just want payment. So leave your collateral here, and we won't have to involve the courts in the Beis Din. Rabbi Tzvi Fischer asked from here. We learn somebody shechts a cow, and they split it. So a couple of people are partners, and they're splitting it. And this person was not partners. Somebody wants a part of the animal that they shechted. So they shechted an animal, and it's the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And this person says, "I'll take this piece, whatever it may be," and now he owes the money. Now this Rosh Hashanah is in the time when the new moon Rosh Chodesh is designated by witnesses. So the witnesses did not show up on that Rosh Hashanah. It ends up being that Rosh Hashanah is the next day, and the first day was really the last day of the previous year, and it was a Shemitah year. And we know at the end of Shemitah, all debts are forgiven. So this guy borrows, as it were, this piece of meat. He buys it now on credit, and at the end of the day, that debt is forgiven. So we said, if the witnesses did not come that day, and therefore the next day is actually Rosh Hashanah Mashami, the debt is forgiven. The imlav ain't a Mashami, and if not, it's not Mashami. In other words, if that day ends up being, witnesses show up and say that day is indeed the new moon, so then it is not, the debt is not forgiven. In other words, the loan is on the first day of the new year as opposed to the last day of the last year. If in any case it's not collectible by going to Beis Din, my mashamit, what does it mean? He lost the debt. It must be that he could go to Beis Din, and typically, and now he cannot go to Beis Din and charge him. So anyone says no. Shani Hassan the Glei Milta the Choli. The idea is not that he can't take it to Beis Din. It's rather, since everybody knows that the retroactively that day was actually not Yontif, and therefore it really wasn't a Yontif loan. And if it wasn't Shemitah, he'd be allowed to collect it. And that's what he's saying. That if not, since the witnesses never showed up, retroactively that day was not a Yontif loan, it was a regular loan. And therefore it is collectible of Beis Din, because everybody already knows, everybody found out that the first day of Rosh Hashanah retroactively was not Chag. And so it was a collectible, a debt that could be taken to Beis Din. And now, because it was Shemitah year, he can't take it to Beis Din. Tashama. Miseifa. So let's look at the second part of that brisa. Ve'im lav eina meshamit. But if it's not, if retroactively, if witnesses did show up, then it's the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and it's not meshamit. Not meshamit, meaning that the debt is not forgiven. And if you tell me that it's the collectible in Beis Din, so that's what makes sense. That it's not forgiven, and he can go and collect it in Beis Din. But if either way he can't go to Beis Din and collect this debt because it was made on Yontif in an unofficial way. So Amayin Mishamit, what does it mean when it says that it's not collected if in either case it's not collectible in Beis Din? The idea is the Iyoiv Le Shakel. It means that if the first day of Rosh Hashanah retroactively turns out to be the last day of the Shemitah year, so even if he pays him, he's not allowed to take it. But now that it's the first day of the new year, so it's not a part of the Shemitah, so even though he cannot collect it in Beis Din, but if the guy shows up and he's honest enough to show up and pay, he's allowed to keep it. Like Gemara says, wait.
Assuming that he didn't have to pay him, assuming that it turns out to be Shemitah, and he's like, wow, you're out. You don't get to be paid back. Could he say yeah, I'm not going to do that to you. Here, take the money anyway.
Yeah, that's what we're about to see. So what you're saying in the first case, in the case where retroactively the first day of Rosh Hashanah turns out to be the last day of the previous year, in the first case, he would have to say, when the guy shows up to pay, he would have to say, I'm sorry, I cannot accept that because the Torah says the loan is forgiven. And in the last case, he doesn't have to say it. If retroactively it does become, or the first day of Rosh Hashanah actually is the first day of the new year, so it's not a forgiven loan. So he doesn't say that, as we learned. Somebody comes and pays back a debt, and it's Shemitah year, which is already forgiven. So what he should say is, the lender should say, the Torah says that this loan is forgiven. I'm going to release this. If the fellow says, still, I borrowed the money, I want to give it back to you, he should accept it from him. As it says, this is the word of Shemitah. You have to tell him Shemitah, and then it's the borrower's choice to whether pay nevertheless or to accept the forgiveness. Rav Avia Shakam Mashkana, Rav Avia, he would take a mashkan, he would take a collateral when lending on Yontif. Rav Bar Ula Ma'ari Marumi. However, Rav Bar Ula, he would not take something on Yontif, but after Yontif would take something. And as we mentioned, so too, Erev Pesach, somebody's forgot to buy a lamb, and today is the day to shecht it, and it's Shabbos, so what does he do? So he goes to a lamb dealer and says, hey, can I have a lamb? And he'll leave his garment there in order to as collateral. A person can sanctify the carbon on Shabbos, which we'll see that's in and of itself a question. Can somebody sanctify something on Shabbos? And same as Chagiga on Yontif. There's a Chagiga, a holiday offering that has to be brought for the Yontif. and he forgot to designate it beforehand. So he can makdish, he can sanctify it on Yontif. Name a Messiah. Let's say we have proof from our Mishnah. So where it says that a Pesach in Yerushalayim, where it's Shabbos is Erev Yontif, he can go ahead and take a lamb, leave a garment there, and after Yontif he pays him back. He works out, they calculate what he owes him. So Gemara says, no, perhaps there's no proof. Perhaps what Rabbi Yochanan means is not that he's sanctifying the animal on Yontif. That we see from our Mishnah in buying it. What we're talking about is that Rabbi Yochanan is talking about that he already had the korban sanctified and set beforehand. And the question is, we know that korban Pesach can only be brought limenuyav, somebody who is counted and designated on that animal. And he now on Shabbos wants to designate certain people on that lamb. The Meikara Mikdash V'Kai. It was already sanctified as a Pesach, and now he's adding people to the Seder list and saying, you are designated on my lamb. And it says, but we learned that you cannot designate on an animal on Yontif. You cannot designate for a korban on Yontif. So we're talking about someone who is common, that would come on the Pesach. They come to the Seder often, and therefore it makes sense that to sanctify them, because even when you purchased it before Yontif, before Shabbos, you already knew that this is someone that could be designated for it. The Imni Bei Mikar, because he's already counting on him from beforehand. Dummy, it's as if he already counted it. But what about Rabbi Shaya's teaching, where he said that a person could go to a shepherd that he usually buys his korban Pesach from on Shabbos? He could go to him and say, "Hey, I need my korban Pesach," and he can sanctify it and bring it. So there too, Hasam Nami, give me the regalas like Dushalemi Akara. There too, since he always buys his korban Pesach from him, the shepherd, it's like he's designated it on his behalf already and sanctified it on his behalf, and so that next level sanctification can be done on Shabbos as well. Well, Makdish Ktani. Well, he says that you can actually sanctify. So he says Hikdash Alavei Midrabanan. It means this is a uplifting and a second level hektish rabbinically. In other words, the shepherd already designated it, or it's already been designated as a korban Pesach, but the people have not been counted, and this is the next level of designated. Is that really what Rabbi Yochanan said? Because Rabbi Yochanan said that you can sanctify on Shabbos. But we know Rabbi Yochanan says, as a general rule, the halacha is like any unattributed Mishnah. Tanana, we learned Lamakdishin, you cannot sanctify, another form of sanctification of a financial donation based on people, or just a gifting something to hektish. You also can't take tithes and truma. And that's on Yontif, Shabbos, and for sure not on Shabbos. So we see that the Mishnah says you cannot sanctify. How can you say Rabbi Yochanan says that you can? Because generally we know that an unattributed Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan said that's the halacha. So here we get finally to the idea that really is going on here. When there's a designated obligatory korban for that day, so you have no choice. You have to be able to bring it on that day. There you're allowed to sanctify it. That's korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. That's a chagiga on Yontif. These are obligations that you don't have a choice. Therefore, you can do it even on Shabbos. When there is a choice, then you can't do it on Shabbos.
That's a question. Like with I'm thinking of Dalit meaning. So if I came to you, I said I've got to get my Dalit meaning, and you have every year you do the shuk, and every year I get from the shuk. Would I be able to get Dalit meaning on Yontif, and it would be my Dalit meaning?
Yeah, the acquisition is made. The korban Pesach also has to be yours. The
Right, that's what
acquisition
I'm
is
saying.
made. It's just that so you need your lulav, you need your esser. You didn't buy it, and the mitzvah is that it should be yours. The acquisition can be made. Obviously, you'd be talking about on Yantif, on Shabbos,
Yontif,
you
down
take
Shabbos.
one. But on Yantif, yes, you the acquisition is made, and that's the mitzvah, so you can do it. Mana Adam. So we're at the bottom of 148b, one Kufim Chesam at base, the Mishnah. Mana Adam esar chosav ve'es paparosav mipiv. A person can count how many guests he's supposed to have and how much food he has by orally. However, lemon exav, you can't look at a list and a written list. And the Gemara is going to tell us two possible reasons why that's a problem. Ma'apis Adam. A person can make a lottery with his children and household members around the table, saying, "Okay, who's getting which portion of the meal?" But you cannot bet on larger pieces, larger portions versus smaller portions. You can also make lotteries about kachim. On Yantiv, about a korban between the kahanim, and let each kohen decide, sort of take a lottery what they're going to take. But not on portions, and the Gemara is going to explain that too. So my timer, we're in Kuf Mem Tesam at Aleph 149a. What's the reason that our Mishnah says that you cannot look at a list when making your calculations of guests versus food? My timer, Amar of Bevoy. Rav Bevoy says, we're afraid you're going to start crossing off some names and say, oh, this person is ended up coming, this person, we're out of space, let's send a note that they should take a rain check and come back another time, and you're going to start erasing. And so the issue is that you may actually write or erase. Abaye says, we saw earlier in the Masechta, we'll see a little bit more about it today, that you're not allowed to read documents. Tessa says loan documents or sale documents, and the reason is because those are again, something you may erase and make you may make corrections to, or you're involving yourself in business, and therefore you can't read documents like that. And if you have a document of a list, which was, people didn't have that many documents at home, and if you made a list, a written list, that's similar to financial documents, and we're afraid if you read, Abai says, we're afraid that if you're going to read this, you're going to read your financial documents. So the Gemara is going to try multiple versions of what difference does it make, whether this is the reason is you may erase, or the reason is you may read financial documents. The difference would be if, the difference is if he wrote it on a wall. So if it's written on a wall, umidli, and it's hanging high, so he can't erase it. Or today in the halacha, the poskim say what you should do with your lists, your menus, etc., that you may erase. Put it in a slipcase, put it inside something, or hang it inside a closet. In those cases, typically you're not going to make erasures to, and so you can do that. So the Gemara's case is that it's up high, and you're not likely to erase it. So if you're according to Rav Bevoy, that the concern is that you're going to erase, no such concern. But according to Abaye, that the concern is you may end up reading other financial documents. That's still a concern because it's a document. So you're looking at one document, you may remember that you need to make a change to another document. Well, even according to the version that says that we're concerned that you may erase, why is he not concerned that you may read other financial documents? And besides, is that really true? That when you have something that we're concerned you may make erases, you may erase and make some changes to, and it's out of reach, therefore you're allowed to read from it? It's not true. But Tani, we learned, lo yikra lo eradnir. This is early in the Masechta. It says that don't read in front of a candle. because if you read by a candle and you're not seeing well, you may tilt the candle to get some more oil to the wick so that the flame is brighter, and that's obviously prohibited on Shabbos. And there we said, Rabba said over there, even if the candle is 2 stories high, even if it's 2 ladders away, even if it's 10 houses away. One on top of the other. You can't read. In other words, it's not based upon whether you practically can tilt the candle, but rather, Chazal said, if everybody's going to make a subjective assessment of whether or not they're in danger of tilting the candle, then we're going to have problems. As the Gemara told a story earlier that Rabbi Shmuel thought, he said, you know what, I'm going to read in front of a candle and I will not tilt it, and he almost did. And he stopped himself. So you see that anybody can. You're focused on something else, and so you may make a mistake, and therefore, regardless of how high it is, everybody has to. The rule applies equally. So to over here, regardless if the prohibition in the Mishnah of reading documents is on account of erasures that you may make, it should be prohibited regardless of whether it's high or not. So rather, the difference is that somebody wrote on the wall itself, and it's low down, and you could erase it, but it doesn't. But that's not document-like. If you're concerned about erasure, yeah, that's a concern. But according to, if your concern is maybe you're going to read other documents, a little note on a wall low down is not going to be confused with documents. So Gemara says, so what? Why is he not concerned? Not only that he may read other documents, but maybe he's going to make erasure. Maybe he's going to make some changes. It's not talking about a regular document that he wrote on, or rather, it's etched into a tablet. And that type of document is hard to change. That kind of notes that you made of who's coming, that's hard to change. And we're not concerned that you're going to do that because it's an etching. It's using a pick to get it to engrave, and that's not something that you're going to just change. Even if you need to make a change, you're not going to erase it. But documents, it's still similar to documents, because it is a document. It's on a tablet and that's similar to their documents. Obviously, those days, to us, etchings in a stone or a tablet, it will not be similar. Well, so what? He should still be concerned, even though that there's no etchings, but Abai is correct that he may read other documents. And if you're going to tell me, no, people don't confuse documents with an etching in a tablet. But Tanya, that's not true. We learned person can make the calculation, say, okay, how many fit in this room, and how many are going to be sitting outside on the deck, and how many portions I need to put out. So this person is making a calculation. All miksav shal gabi kosel, only if it's written on a wall. But not if it's written on a tablet. So you see that the tablet itself is a concern. If it's just written with ink, what difference is there if it's on the wall or on a tablet? Must be that it's talking about that it was etched. Then he can read off of the etching on a wall, but not on a tablet, because that may be confused, obviously, with financial documents, even though, because it's not on account of erasure, because you can't really erase it. It's an etching in stone. So must be that it's on account of that you're going to mix it up with financial documents. And if you read this, you're going to come to read other things and make changes there. So we're going to go back to that it's written on a wall. Umidli, and it's high up. And this you said, wait, but Rabbah said in regards to the candle that you can't read in front of a candle because you may tilt it. That regardless of how high it is, the Rabbah Tanoi, whether that would apply elsewhere or not, is a machlokas tanaim. The Tani will learn a person can count his guests and how many portions he has orally, but not from a written document. However, Ravacha says you are allowed to read even from a written document, if it's written on a wall. Now, of course, if it's written eye level or low down, you still have a concern that you may make a change and erase it. Elulav, the custom of midley, must be that it is written and out of reach, that he's not going to change it. And you see that Rav Acha says it's okay to read off the wall, and we're not concerned that you could erase it on account of that it's out of reach. And the Tanakama, like Rabbah, says that no, you can't read it even if it's out of reach on account of that you may erase, and we can't leave it subjective, and so it always applies. So we see this machlokas of Rabbah is actually a machlokas elsewhere of whether or not this universally applies. And Rav Beva, in our case, says that the question of whether it's a concern of erasing or not is going to be in this case as well. It's going to be machlokas of whether if it's out of reach, it's prohibited, and it's going to be permitted, and Abai says it's prohibited anyhow because you may read documents. And this machlokas is similar to a machlokas we see in regards to this matter. The Tani we learned in Royim B'Mirror b'Shabbos. You can't look into a mirror on Shabbos, because if you pick up the mirror to your face and you see that you have hair that it's out of place, you don't like it, you're going to pluck it. However, a mayor says if it's a mirror on the wall, then it's okay. It's only handheld mirrors that are prohibited, but a mirror that's set on the wall, not a problem. What's the distinction? Since the mirror is on the wall, he's going to have to step away and find a tweezer or a scissors to cut or pluck that hair. And since you step away from the mirror, you can remember, it's Shabbos, I can't do it. However, if it's a handheld mirror, you can bring it along with you to where you get the tweezers or the scissors, and then you're going to pluck it. So we see that Rameir makes a distinction between whether it's practical to do this malacha or not. We're talking about a metal mirror, so their mirrors are made sometimes out of just a shiny piece of metal. As Rav Nachman said in the name of Rabbi Rabu, why did they say that a mirror of metal is prohibited? In other words, a handheld mirror is prohibited. Because a person's going to cut off split edges of their hair, or split ends, or pluck hairs that they don't want, and that's only in a movable mirror. But we see that the first opinion does not make such a distinction, and so again we see this concept that if using something is going to lead to a Torah prohibition, it's prohibited, but according to Rabbi Meir and the previous opinion in Rabacha, it's going to be prohibited only when it's practical, only when it is practical to assume that it's going to be movable, and that's subjective, transgressing, that the transgression would happen. Tana Rabbana, Ksava Ma'alech Tachas Hatzura. Somebody made somebody wrote a caption underneath a piece of art, but Tachas Hatzura, or a bust of some sort. Also, l'kres b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to read the captions, and the reason you wouldn't read the captions is because it's like a financial document. And even the image itself, the bust is prohibited to look at. As it says over here, this is talking about these are gods, and you're not allowed to look at them because you can't turn to gods, even though you're not intending to in any way to deify that or to honor it as such. So my Talmud, so what is it teaching? Amar Rav Chanan said, Al tifnu el midatchem. Don't turn Hashem, God, the true God, away from your mind. So if you're looking at busts and statues of different gods, that's going to turn your head away. But if it's actually just a piece of art, then you can look at it, as it says. And it brings proof from the Gemara earlier. It says that tzaddikim, there was a group of righteous people that were called Benot Kadoshim, holy people, because they wouldn't look at the images on coins of the emperors and Caesar. Ma'apis Adam in Banav. A person may make this lottery with their household about the meal. In with the household, you can make such a lottery. But with the guests, you may not. My time. What's the reason? Could Rabbi Yehuda Mashmul, like Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda Mashmul b'nei Chabura makpidim zalzeh, friends, neighbors, community, where people are very particular with each other. If you borrowed, a teaspoon of salt, please bring it back, etc. So so they're going to transgress anytime they're off in measure and in value in size. And you can't borrow from them on Yantiv because it will be considered borrowing, not a gift, and you're not allowed to borrow and lend on Yantiv. And we turn the page to Kuf Mem Testament base. And according to Hillel, it'll also be a ribis problem, interest, because they will have borrowed, a teaspoon of salt when salt was 99 cents per weight, and now when they're giving it back, it's $1.12, and so the price went up for this teaspoon, and they give back the teaspoon, they've increased value. The Gemara says, well, then he shouldn't be allowed to do so with his household either. No, that's actually permissible, and based on this, could Rabbi Yehuda Marav, like Rabbi Yehuda taught in the name of Rav. Household members that are samich al shulchanai, that are living off of the household, they're not making their own income and not supporting themselves. They're being supported by the parents. So then the parents are allowed to lend to them in ribis, but it's really not lending, because in any case they give it to them, but they can give it to them and charge them interest from essentially from their own pocket, but just so that the children understand the concept of what it means to borrow and pay back more than you have, and how difficult and how biting interest is. Well, then you should even be allowed to make a lottery about a larger portion, a smaller portion, and say, look, if you want the larger portion, you're going to have to pay X amount or hold off, etc. And that should be allowed. And the Gemara says, indeed, you're correct. However, the Mishnah is missing part of the text, and here's what the Mishnah means to say. A person can make a lottery, a lottery with the household, his children and household members that are all reliant on his table, meaning that he's financially supporting them. Even with a large portion against a smaller portion, and make such in order to teach the kids the value of and the dangers of gambling and interest, etc. My time, as Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, and you could do so with the household, but with guests you may not. My time, like Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, on account of that, since people are particular with each other, it's going to end up being ribis or interest or loaning on Shabbos, etc. However, not only that, not only on Shabbos, but if it's a mana gedola, if it's a larger portion against a lower portion, you can't do a lottery anyhow on account of my time mishum kubya, on account of that it is gambling, and the person who bought into this chance of getting a better piece of meat and this lottery is only doing it on account of because they want to get the better part, and they didn't get it, and then they are remorseful about their investment or lack thereof, about their betting on it, and that could be considered a form of theft, and so don't do it. Matilin chalashin, and you can also make lotteries for the kohanim on what portion they're going to get from the korban. So it says they can do it for the korban, but not for the portions. Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov, the daughter of the son of the daughter of Yaakov, said, but not yesterday's portion of korban for today. So shlamims are allowed to be eaten for 2 days, or other korbanos for the evening after, and so the kohen, the korban was brought erev Yontif, and now on Yontif they want to divide that for yesterday's portion by a lottery. That you can't do. Pshita, that seems obvious. It's on Yontif. Why should you do it for yesterday's portion? Since it says, and your nation is like the Kohanim fighting, so you see Kohanim were somewhat more competitive, and therefore perhaps we should allow them to make a lottery so that there's no fights about it. Kamash will say no such concern. It's Yantif. You cannot make a lottery for yesterday's korban. Once we brought a teaching from Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Yaakov's daughter, so bring another teaching or two from it. Anybody that caused that their friend or someone else is punished on their behalf because of them, they're not welcome in the Shekhinah in the world to come. Shenem Menolan. How do we know this? Is it on account of that we said Hashem said who's going to convince Achav to sin so that he can get a punishment? So you will go up and fall in Ramos Gilad in the heights of Gilad. Each one came up with another idea. The wind came up with an idea, and the water came up with an idea, etc. And the wind came before Hashem and said, I will convince him. And I will, what does it mean? It says, I will be a false prophecy, a false breath in the mouth of all of Achav's prophets who will lead him astray. And Hashem says, go ahead, lead him astray. And you will succeed. Say, go out and do so. And we say, what spirit was this that said so? This is the spirit of Navos who he stole his land and killed him off. Who might say, when Hashem say, go out, go out, you're not welcome amongst me. If you want to hurt someone else, you're not welcome. Even though Hashem asked who wants to do it, but you're not welcome in my environment. Maybe it's not on account of that he hurt someone else and brought punishment to someone else, even to Achav, a sinner, a bad person, but on account of that he spoke falsehood, and falsehood is not welcome in near Hashem. It's from here. Savata kolon mikovet. So we'll leave that for tomorrow.